Hello, everyone. So today I'll just be doing a presentation on my personal journey and my personal experience on amassing a collection on not a backyard, but on a high-rises balcony. So I intend to make this presentation uh, in terms that I'm not really an expert in growing cactus and succulent from seeds. But rather, the way I want to present this presentation is sort of portray it as a chronicle. So from start, when I start collecting my first plants that I bought from the first cactus and succulent show, all the way to the current state. So I'm gonna babble a lot, so just bear with me. Okay, so this is a view of, I took this not too long ago, maybe a few weeks ago. This is a view from my balcony. As you can see, pretty nice scenery. This is a south-facing balcony, so it gets amazing exposure. However, in high summer, it tends to get a little more shaded because the sun is just way too high in the sky. So it casts quite a bit of shadow on the balcony, but I see that as a bonus because sometimes it gets too hot on the balcony. So having a little bit of shade, especially during these few months, from late June to maybe late August, I see that as a bonus. Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to 2016. We are not in the current apartment that I'm talking from right now. This is actually from a windowsill in my college's dorm room. I just finished undergrad and I'm starting another degree, and then this is basically a nice windowsill, also south-facing, in my room. So June 2016, I was wondering maybe I should pick up a hobby because this degree is driving me nuts. So I basically quickly browsed the internet, and then, oh, this is neat, a cactus and succulent sale in Ellen Gardens. So I just happened to walk there, and then boom, right off the bat, I bought two cacti. One from Delabor, the one on the right. This is Rebutia Christinae, and the one on the left is Astrophytum from Flat. And this is just another view. As you can see, I live on basically the ground floor of my dorm room. And you can see from the street, actually. So this is just from my windowsill, you can actually see the street right outside. And then soon after, I kind of like this whole cactus and succulent thing. Why not try something from seeds? So I went to my first cactus and succulent meetings the very same months after the June 2016 show and sale. And some members brought a Melocactus matanzanus plant with a bunch of fruits on it. And then I asked that member, is it easy to start from seed? And the way he responded, he literally plucked out one of the fruits from the cephalium and then handed it to me. He said, why not try it out yourself? So that's exactly what I did. So I took those seed pods home and then sowed them. I just basically Google the baggy method, which we'll go into more details later, and then start off my new seed sowing journey. And who would have known that the moment I see when the little green blobs pops out, it was absolutely intoxicating. And I was immediately hooked. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do from this point on. And it basically exploded from there. So I think this is a perfect segue to go into just a brief overview on how to germinate seeds of cactus and succulents. In particular, I will focus on cactus in this presentation. Now, this topic has been talked over many, many, many times in the past by different members. So I don't want to bore you guys. I just want to give you guys the principles and just a quick overview on how to start cactus and succulent from seeds. So why from seeds? Well, instead of going to a plant show and sale where there's a few selection to choose from, you have thousands of varieties to choose from instead of just a few dozens. Um, Also, for those of you who are very into location data, many of these seeds offered online have very, very thorough locality data available. So you can brag about owning all localities of a particular species or satisfying your OCDs. Um, so you have a whole catalog of every single lot that you grow. Another advantage of starting cactus from seeds is you don't have to break a bank. Um, Seeds are generally quite cheap. From a little packet, you tend to pay about $2, $2 US, or sometimes around that range, depending on how rare the species is. But normally you won't be paying as high as of amount if you invest in a full-grown plant. Obviously, it is a long-term investment. So in the long run, you're paying with time and patience instead of money. But is that necessarily a bad thing, waiting for plants to go from seeds to a full flowering plant? It is about the process. You get to marvel at the process of a little blob and then growing its own first tubercle, the first aerial, all the way to its first flower. It is a totally different feeling than just buying a full-grown plant from a plant sale. It is much more satisfying, at least in my opinion. Another advantage, benefits of starting cactus from seeds is ex situ conservation. So as many people might be aware, many of the succulent species around the world are being threatened, whether it's through agriculture, poaching, etc. So by growing these seeds and then growing them away from their habitat, we're essentially preserving the genetics, the gene lines, and preserving the plants elsewhere. So the plants will not be extinct. Okay, so now let's get into the practical sides of it. So very quickly, so the cactus seeds really only need three things to germinate well. The first is a constant, non-fluctuating supply of moisture. So it's basically you want to surround the seeds with moisture. So it I'm not talking about soggy wet, talking more about um, if you use your finger to touch the surface of soil, it feels moist, but it doesn't feel gloopy. Another principle is warmth. So most seeds will germinate between 18 to 30 degrees Celsius. I have experimented with fluctuating the temperature between day and night, having it to cool down below 18 degrees at night, and then go back up to between 18 to 30 degrees Celsius during the day. I have not noticed any difference. So as long as the seeds stay in a relatively warm environment, they tend to germinate pretty well. So this is, I'm talking about average. There are obviously some exceptions. Some seeds actually prefer heat to germinate. One of them would be many of the opuntioids group. They actually require extreme high heat to germinate. But I'm just talking about, I'm just generalizing here. Now, light is another essential element to have the cactus seed germinate. Most cactus seeds are very, very small. Therefore, it is an evolutionary adaptation that they germinate in the presence of light. If the seeds gets carried away into a shady area and germinate there, the chance of survival is extremely low, provided they're very small seed mass. So over years and years of evolution, um, the cactus, most species of cactus we have will only germinate when you provide it with some light. So I'm not talking about direct sunlight, but any source of dapple light, even clouded light or shaded lights, or just hovering a few fluorescent tubes above the seeds will do the trick. So there are so many methods of germinating cactus from seeds. I'm going to focus on my go-to method, which is the baggy method. Why I go with the baggy method? It is because to uphold the three principles that I mentioned in the last slides. When you keep seeds in a closed bag, you're giving it a closed system. You're not losing moisture, and then you're not over fluctuating the amount of moisture that the seeds is getting. So you don't have to worry about seeds drying out and then watering it and then accidentally overwatering it. And you're also keeping the seeds in an absolutely closed bag. So if you have disinfect everything inside the bag well, then nothing gets out and nothing gets in. So you end up having a perfect system for seeds to germinate and grow to a certain degree. And another advantage of using this method is to grow cactus with extremely small seeding and small seeds. For example, Aztecium or Strombocactus. These germinate relatively well, but the moment you dry it out, the seeds die basically immediately. So having them in a constant uh, bag with high humidity, it keeps them well and alive, provided that you don't oversaturate the soil. And of course, this method is excellent for lazy people. You basically bag them up and you forget about them. I mean, you still have to look at it every once in a while. For me, I still look at it every day. But for most people, if you put the seeds in the bag, you can go on your vacation and come back with a bunch of seedlings. So the specifics. These are the items that you need to use this method. So I would say for soil, you can basically use anything. When I first started germinating seeds using this method, I pretty much go to Home Depot and buy a houseplant soils, and I use that. As people know, those soils are generally very, very peaty, uh, very, very high in organic material, and they still seem to do fine, at least for my first few batches. So it really doesn't matter which soil you use as long as it is very, very well draining. Um, you can also saturate the soil with some pre-fertilized water, but just be careful you don't want to overdo it because that encourages algae bloom. In terms of pots and labels, because usually you want to disinfect these material with heat. You want something that's heat resistant. So when I use my pots, I tend to pour boiling water over it. And if you have non-heat resistant pots, they tend to melt on you. So I would just when you buy some pots, just do a quick experiment. I pour some hot water over it, see if it melts. But I prefer pots that are heat resistant, but it's not an absolute requirement. You can still disinfect it by soaking them in chlorine solution overnight. Now, water, it doesn't really matter what kind of water you use. It's not it's not a determinant factor whether you be successful with this or not. But I still prefer to use distilled water. It's just my own choice, but you can use tap water. That's fine. In terms of bags, I like to use Ziplocs that are designed to store frozen food. So these bags, I like them because they're convenient and they are basically germ-free because they are sold commercially to store food. So when you unzip the bag, it should be a germ-free environment before you expose the inside to air. And that's I think that's a fairly good advantage to your chances of successes. Another essential item I would say is keep a spray bottle of 70% alcohol with you. So whenever I do these, I would constantly spray down my work area. So 70% isopropyl alcohol, you can get this in any pharmacy. I just keep it handy by my side and I spray down everything, even between each batch. So I would spray down the workbench, sow a batch, and then spray it down again, and then sow the next species. Over the years, I've gotten a little more lazy, but I would say in a perfect world, this is what I would do. Okay, so the steps. So first, so heat is the method that we we disinfect everything. It is not a sterilization. So even if you've done all these steps, you're not killing all microbes. You're killing most microbes, but there will still be some remaining. Um, and that doesn't really matter because most of the time seeds themselves have some spores, some fungal spores on them. The idea is to kill most of them. Or we're not trying to flask orchid seeds. We're not trying to create a totally sterile environment. We're just doing our best to get rid of most pathogens. So in terms of soil, when I was living in my dorm room, I microwave my soil. But now living in my apartment, I use my oven and then I bake it for around 1 hour. And for pots, etc., I pour boiling water over them and then have them soak in uh, the hot water for a few minutes before pouring the water out. And then I already mentioned that always spray down the work area with 70% alcohol. Pre-label the bags before you start sowing the seeds. If you're sowing more than 20 species of them, you want to be very organized. You want to make sure you mark everything down first before you get going. Once that's all done, once the soil has cooled down to room temperature or lukewarm temperature, you can sprinkle the seeds to the surface. I prefer not to cover the seeds, but because seeds do need light to germinate, some people do sprinkle a bit of sand over them, but I don't. And once that's done, bag them up and then place them under light and warmth between 18 to 30 degrees Celsius, and then monitor daily for germinations. So beside monitoring for germination, you also want to monitor for algae bloom or fungal bloom. Sometimes you get those very silky fungus. They aren't necessarily pathogenic to the seeds, but they do cover the entire soil surface. So when that happens, I think that's a done deal. You just have to take the pot outside of the bag and just try to germinate them without the baggy methods. If they germinate and you notice some minor signs of fungal growth, you can spray down the soil surface with some disinfectant. I use hydrogen peroxide because they are easily attainable. So that's what I would do. But if the fungal issue is becoming a big problem, then it's time to remove the entire pot outside of the bag. So let's say none of the stuff happened, the seeds germinated, you don't see any signs of pathogens or infection, then you can keep the seedlings in the same environment for 3 to 4 months without ever opening the bag once. For some species, you can actually keep the seeds for up to a year, especially those with tiny, tiny seeds, such as Cactus. Once the seeds germinate, they will start to prefer cooler nights. Most cactus, they go through a physiological process called cam physiology, which I won't go into too much detail right now. Basically, they need cooler nights to exchange gases and encourage growth, and especially for root growth. So usually during the night, I would cool down the temperature to below 22 degrees Celsius, and that tends to encourage better root growth. So I would say right now, high summer, July, August, and early September, when nighttime temperature really dips down below 25 degrees Celsius, I would not do this. I would keep sowings to early fall or spring, or even winter if you have an indoor setup. But summer is usually the month that I don't sow. And then after 3 to 4 months, you're satisfied with how big the seedling has gotten and the growth rate has plateaued, then you can start opening up the bag, but you will need 1 to 2 weeks to acclimatize them. So usually I would unzip the top of my Ziploc and then just let that sit for around 1 to 2 weeks before taking the entire pot outside of the bag. You can tell that they're acclimatized because you'll see the water vapor, the condensation gets less and less and less every day. And then after 1 to 2 weeks, the condensation will be completely gone, and then you know it's safe to remove the pot. And that's it. So that's a very quick overview on using the baggy method. This is a batch that I sowed last fall. Not all of them were successful in the bag. Some see fungal growth right away, and so a lot of them had to be taken out before the 3 to 4 month parts. But those that do stay in bags for up to 3 to 4 months, they see really good growth. So they don't get stunted at all. They retain really good growth rate. So those are the seedlings you see on the left there. So they actually stayed in the bag for the full duration that I'd hoped for. But other ones, unfortunately, I have to remove them from the bag because I start to see dying offs. And when that happens, they do have to come out. Okay, so that's it. That's the baggy method. And now let's go back to my little chronicle. So we're back to my windowsill in September 2016. Um, Now this is one of the bookshelves in my dorm room, and this is my very, very uh, impromptu setup. As you can see, I'm using 2 empty shoe boxes to prop up the 4 fluorescent lights. And as you can see, the grow space I have is extremely small. But then again, for someone who just found their hobby, this is amazing. This is 5 star. This is like going from 1 star hotel to 5 star hotel. Going from windowsill to this is a big upgrade. This is just another close-up of the setup. A few months later, as you can see, I have germinated a few more seeds. This is the time where I'm also absolutely obsessive with growing cactus from seeds. So I was buying seeds left and right from the internet, and this is the same year in 2000. So this is uh, in the autumn of 2016. I bought a bunch of seeds, and these are the results that you see in February 2017. So the same winter, a lot of the more mature plants, I kind of just kept it on my windowsill. The heat from my apartment doesn't really affect the cold seeping from the windowsill. In fact, I found it to be perfect for dormancy because it's the perfect interface between the outside elements and the heater from my dorm. I'm not paying for the heat. I'm just paying for the monthly rent for dormitory for the semester. So at the time, I didn't really care about wasting too much energy. I just want to keep these plants alive. And they survived. So for this winter, they survived very well. But this is also a foreshadow to a disaster that's going to come up later this year, which we'll get to. So the following year, after the following spring, I participated in my first Cactus and Succulent sale. I was very happy that I successfully started some cactus from seeds and was eager to actually sell some of the seedlings, especially if you look at what's inside this box that I quickly put up before my taxi arrived to take me to Allen Gardens. Um, Most of them are Echinocerias, some other species to just to show off at the show and sale. And don't worry about the clothes in the middle. That's to prevent things from bumping around during the ride. Um, Nothing. I couldn't really uh, purchase anything to make sure they don't bump around. So I just use some clothes to serve that purpose. And the following spring, everything seems to do very well. The cactus I bought from Dalibor and Vlad, doing excellent, um, blooming quite spectacularly on the windowsill, as you can see here. So on the left, you have Mammillaria teresii. These are grafted, and the same Rebutia from the very first cactus I ever bought in Toronto. Okay, so fast forward to winter of 2017. This is the winter that disaster struck. Um, I thought that following the success of keeping the plants on the windowsill the previous winter, I thought it would be okay to keep my collection on the windowsill to overwinter there, and then going back home to Vancouver for a nice vacation. And what I came back to after my Vancouver, the little break in Vancouver is this. most, and this is a pretty hard hitting lesson for me, is to never trust Mother Nature. Even with fall heater on, the winter of early 2018, January 2018, and December 2017 have to be proved one of the coldest ever. Um, and the the plants that you see in this slide were all turned into popsicles by me, and none of them survived. So even the very first cactus I bought from Delabore, it it died, unfortunately. But there is it's got still got a good ending, but I'll get back to the good ending later. But after this, I know that I'm not supposed to just leave plants to the elements. Okay, so this is January 2018. I have upgraded my bookshelf from a one-tier growth shelf to a two-tier good bookshelf. So what you're seeing here is the top tier and the bottom tier. So goodbye to the books. I basically moved all the books somewhere else and then used the entire bookshelf for these purposes. But don't worry, the books are still around. I still need to study, but I'm just repurposed the bookshelf to a two-tier green grow room instead of one. So going into summer 2018, this is where I had the opportunity to move to my current location, which is this apartment right here. And then what do you know? The moment you are provided with more space, more resources, you immediately go to experimental mode. So this is what I experimented with. It is a variation of the bag method. This is the sauce cups method. I found this method on a YouTube video. Basically, the idea is to just sow seeds into vermiculite, which is a organic material, which is free of any organic material. And the idea is as soon as the seeds germinate, you'll transplant them to uh, another pot with proper soil. I don't particularly find this method to be that good for me. The seeds seem to germinate well, but they also die very quickly after germination, uh, owing to these problems. So these cups are extremely tiny, meaning that they cannot tolerate any small fluctuation of an environment. So when the light comes on during the day, it will overheat. And then if you just slightly overwater each container, the seedling basically rots right away because the water has absolutely nowhere to go. So, and for people who has worked with vermiculite before, it's a very loose and airy material. And when the roots sprouted, they cannot take any hold to this material. Even though it's very airy, the roots just kind of move on the surface for me, at least for me, of the vermiculite, and then they never establish. So even they germinated well, they die so quickly. And I was very busy then. I didn't have the time to transplant them right away. So I would say the germination rate was pretty good, but the ultimate success rate was low. I might actually try this method again if I have more free time, but I don't think I'm going to try this anytime soon. So from February onward, February 2019 onward, this is a stage in my collection where it sees rapid expansion. So seedlings I sow earlier quickly fill out their pots, and before you know it, they start to, when you repot them, they basically take up exponentially more spaces in your apartment. So on the top left, you see these tiny 2-inch pots with some seedlings. And then just a few months later, you see them on the right start to fill out their little container. And at the bottom is the latest one. They have completely crowded their little pots where they started in. And then before you know it, you're forced to repot them. And then you go from a few little pots to this. Um, uh, 3 little pots go to 2 full trays of cactus and succulents. I would say this is probably another disadvantage of starting your own cactus succulent from seeds, is that when you only want a few plants of the same species in your collection, you end up having to accommodate at least dozens. You also don't want to kill them. You don't want to throw them away because you love them too much. You're obviously not going to just toss them away. Um, but this is what you end up facing. You're looking at less and less room, even though you just moved to a new apartment with way more room. So at the same time, my other collection also starts to explode. It is the year where I thought that, oh, it's time to buy a bunch of cactus. Now I have way more room. I ended up having think that this is a pretty bad decision because at the same time my seedlings is overtaking my apartment. I'm also at the same time buying a bunch of cactus from other members of the club. So there you have it. So this is from 2016 to July to now, just a few weeks ago. I took this photos not too long ago. As you can see, my balcony is now completely full. So before I can even start any more new batches, I will have to get rid of many of these plants. And that wraps up this section of the presentation. And now we'll go into some specific examples that I'm pretty proud of that I start from seeds to flower. So I've started many cactus from seeds. And these are just some of the examples where I've got to a stage where I complete the life cycle to the flowering stage. So let's start off with Lophophora williamsii variety Big Bend. In July 2016, I sowed them on Home Depot. So sorry, this is Home Depot soil, and they seem to do well in this very organic soil. You can see by August 2016, areoles has developed. Now problems start to arise into October 2016. I start to notice some of these plants begin to rot at the base. So sadly, I have to take them outside of the bag, and I was forced to repot them. And what do you know? I did not acclimatize them. I basically plucked them right out, and then put them into 2 pots of soil with very low organic material. So these are the 2 images that you see at the bottom right. And then I basically stunted them. So they were so environmentally stressed, they pretty much turned into a purple-brown color and completely stopped growing. So this is November 2016 on the left. They haven't done anything since I transplanted them, but by January 2017, I start to notice new growth breaking through. It is as if a new growth developed from within, and it kind of crack, it basically burst out from the old skins. So it's almost like molting a little bit. So this is January 2017. You can see that all these plants have started to grow a new head from the old. This is a few months later. The new heads has greened up. A few months later in May, the new heads are developing quite nicely and finally showing the classic look of Lophophoras. By July 2017, they got big enough for me to repot them. And by April 2018, as you can see on the bottom right, the roots are basically pushing the pot, deforming the pot. So it's time to repot them in 2018 of April. I mean, look at the sizes of those roots. And then a year later, repot them again. Sorry, I must correct myself. I should have said these are actually stems. These are not roots. And August 2020, they were planted in their current home. And then by January 2021, they flowered for me and set seeds in April 2021. Okay, so this is Melocactus matanzanus. This is the batch of seeds from the members, from one of the members of one of my first meetings at the club. This is from the seed pods that he gave me. So I would say this species is quite significant to me because it is basically my entry into this entire hobby. It is the first batch of seeds I've ever sown. Sadly, this very same batch, after I transplanted them in December 2016, they all rotted from the base. You can see a picture on the right. So basically, the entire batch is dead because I think the mistake I made was that I watered them too soon after transplanting them, and then they all basically rotted. But the good news is I didn't sow all the seeds from those seed pods that were given to me. So eventually I resowed them, a fresh batch, and I learned from my mistake. I did not, after I transplanted them, I did not water them for at least a week. This is the second batch that was successful after transplant in November 2017. And this is basically showing the growth over the last few years. So once they have established Melocactus are actually really easy, a very easy genus to grow until they develop their cephalium, of course. And March 2021, one of the plants developed their first cephalium and then flowered. So I actually have fruits of them now, but I didn't take a picture of them, but they did eventually fruit for me as well. Okay, so Ortego Cactus mactigallii. This is one of my favorite cactus species, owing to their silvery color, silvery lime green epidermis. Not only that, their epidermis also appear textured, like almost leathery. So August 2016, soon after germination. By October 2016, I noticed that one of the seedlings began to rot and die from the growing point. So I immediately removed the entire pot from the bag and then top dressed them with some river sand and some charcoal. And they seem to take that quite well. And just in a few months, you see fresh tubercles growing. And then a few months later, they start to resemble young Ortego cactus. Now, the story isn't completely all happy. On the left, you see them doing extremely well in April 2017. But after the winter disaster of 2017/2018, I lost a few seedlings from cold. So you can see the yellowing one, it's basically dead seedlings being killed by the wind chill from the windowsill. And on the bottom right, you can see that this is actually a seedlings infested earlier with spider mites. And this is a goner because especially for small seedlings, when mites attack young plants and they basically killed off all the photosynthesizing epidermis of the seedlings. And they have no reserve energies to form new growth, and the seedlings eventually die. But I do have enough that survived through all these ordeals, and this is them in January 2019, doing very well in their pure pumice soil. And this is them recently. They managed to push out their first flower this year. As you can see, one of my biggest plants is also branching, forming new heads. Obviously, the next goal is to try and cross-pollinate them and get my own seeds from them. Echinocereus rigidissimus variety, ruby spinus. This is one of the easiest and the most robust plants for me to start from seeds. From beginning to the end, they have no problem whatsoever. Very, very easy growing, very, very beautiful plants, amazing spines, amazing flowers. From October 2016 to January 2017. I'm just showcasing their growth between this time. So January 2017, I transplanted them from the original pot. And then just in a few months, just look at the growth. In a few months, they grew so much. And from May 2018 to August 2020, they keep on growing with absolutely no problem. This is one of the easier cactus to grow, in my opinion. But it doesn't take away from its beauty. It's absolutely spectacular. And this is June 2021. After initial sowing in 2016, they finally flowered. I would just let the flowers speak for itself. Okay, Epithelantha micromeris. I'm just gonna go over these more quickly now because it's pretty much the same idea. I'm just showing from after they leave the bag and then all the way to flower. So this is growth changes just in 2 months for this species. So from May 2018 to May 2021. Now, if you look at the June 2018 photos on the top right, so this is where I was still on the windowsill. And on that same windowsill, the screen eventually fell off due to basically an old window. And some squirrels got to it. And this is basically squirrel damage. But they eventually fully recovered from the squirrel damage. They scabbed over, and in May 2021, they finally flowered for me, and they actually have some fruits now. So I didn't have the time to take photos of these fruits and put it on this presentation, but I managed to get a few those spectacular red fruits from this species. The flowers are inconspicuous, but the fruits, they're something else. So this is Matucana mediciniorum, same idea, from January 2017 to July 2017, just showing the difference in growth. And this is from November 2017 to more recently. Again, amazing flowers, amazing scarlet tube-shaped flowers. Another Matucana intertexta, between January 2017 to July 2017. And from November 2017 to flower. This is another very easy cactus to grow. I pretty much lost 0 plants from the single batch. I sold most of them to other members and other visitors of Cactus and Succulent sales, and kept only 3 plants with me. And this is one of the plants flowering last year. Very, very nice orange flowers. Okay, so Strombocactus deciformis. So this is where, this is a prime example where the baggy method proved to be, in my opinion, superior to other methods. Um, I basically microwave the soil repeatedly for 15 minutes, knowing that this is one of the smallest seeds. I basically repeatedly wipe down the workbench with alcohol, repeatedly use hand sanitizer when I sow this species, um, and I let the seed expose to the elements as little as possible. And as you can see, the germination is good. I didn't really lose any seedlings from diseases. And as you can see, the seedlings are very, very small. They're basically little pin dots, little green pin dots, back in February 2017. And in a few months, they grow exponentially. So I kept this one in the bag for 4 or 5 months, actually. Finally out of the bag in April 2017. Later the same year, fast forward to June 2021. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any other photos between June 2021 and July 2017. So I know there's a 4-year gap between the two photos, but I just didn't take them. But they basically resemble young adult plants between the last photo and this photo. And finally, in June 2021 of this year, one of the plants decided to flower. And this is it in full flower. Okay, just a few more species to showcase. Obragonia negrii from February 2017 on the top left when they first germinate, and to the first few tubercles in April 2017. Later the same year, August 2017, start to look like small Obragonia plants. Oops. And from April 2019 to July 2020. So a lot of people say Obragonia is a difficult species to grow, but I find that to be contrary. I actually find Obragonia to be very, very robust. I lost very few of them from this batch of seedlings. I think the only downside of this species is that it's quite slow growing, and that's really it. I think that's the same case with Eriocarpus as well. I find these plants, the survival rates are very high, but it's just that the growth rate is so incredibly slow. And this is it, one of the plants in flower this year. Pretty happy about that. Okay, so the final few stories here, I just want to go over. So remember the first plants I ever purchased from Dalibor, the Rebutia steinmannii subspecies Christinae that died in the winter of 2017 to 2018. I managed to save some of the seeds from the dead plants. And this is the progeny. So I can say that I did not really lose the plants after all. It's just in a regenerative form, in a rebirthed form. Same story with this. I got this from this plant, Copiapoa humilis subspecies tenuissima, from auction in 2016. And I lost it the next winter, 2017, from that cold, from that chill as well. I saved one of the fruit pods. And this is the progeny. And then finally in June 2021, the first few buds form on one of the plants. And this is it later, just a few, 1 month ago. So I actually do have some fruits developing. I have successfully pollinated them. So I've completed two growing cycles already. Turbinicarpus swabodae. This is a self-pollinating species. You only need one plant to get seeds. Very, very small cactus, but quite quaint. This is one of the seed pods they're hissing. showing some of the seeds inside. Mammillaria grozoiana, one of my favorites, Mammillaria. And this is it this year with their spectacular flowers. Now, this is one of the species that flower for me the fastest. From germination to flowering only took 1.5 years. So these were sown early 2020. And just this month, it flowered for me, July 2021. Echinocerius leucanthus or Wilcoxia albiflorus. Another one from seeds to flower, Echinopsis aurea. Very easy to grow, very beautiful flowers. Another example of a species that grow from seeds to flower, Mammillaria zamaniana. Here's another one, Gymnocalycium ubiberry. Sulcorebutia aranacea. Fralia. And that's it. So where do I go next from here? I'm thinking I might start trying my hands into grafting. I do have some grafting stock, but I just never had the space or the time to start doing them. I do like to see cactus growing on their own roots. I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of those cactus growers who prefer seeing cactus on their own roots, but I'm not averse to grafting some. So I think that's where I'm gonna go next, and that's it.